We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AVRant. I'm Tom Andrew and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AVRant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered, and moments before this episode began, we fixed Tom's camera. It wasn't even the camera. It was a Skype setting. So now
I was messing around with the Skype settings apparently, and I forgot that I did that.
Is in
which
pristine,
sounds exactly like me.
non-blurry quality. It's everything you could possibly hope for. You'll definitely have to come to YouTube so you can see his headphone cable again. It's a white background.
No.
Being blurred in the background really didn't matter, but that's what was at top of mind since we just started.
I guess.
Yes.
Yeah, I will almost certainly have to get up at some point and refill drinks because I've got not enough caffeine in me, and at all. And
I don't think it even needs a warning anymore. We just take it for granted that at some point that'll need to.
Yeah, and then I went for an extra long bike ride today.
Oh, good.
So that's why I was late. It was 34 miles, which is not that bad, except that this is a group ride, and they do a loop.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they do kind of like a, I don't know, like a circle, and then you can do the circle a second time. The second time, it's as fast as the group wants to go, and sometimes that can be like 23 miles an hour, and sometimes that can be 30. So I haven't ever gone with that second loop before, but today I went with the second loop, and it wasn't that fast. I mean, we got to 30, but not for very long.
All right. Well, good for you. Congratulations.
Well, that's why I need the water, though. Yeah. These guys are all going along at 28 miles an hour, grabbing their water bottles and drinking with one hand. I'm like, I'm not letting go of these handlebars. I've got to be near my brakes. You people are all maniacs. So, well, yeah, it was fun. All right. AVRant podcast, answers your home theater AV questions. Get your question answered. All you have to do is ask by emailing us at question. Slowing it down. question@avrant.com.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
That is
the timbre of my voice is different. It's because I have my door wide open today. There's nobody here. It's just me and the Doge.
Yeah.
She's out there someplace. It's probably, almost certainly, sleeping on top of clean laundry because that's like catnip to dogs.
That's the favorite.
That's just like there could be an entire couch free because I fold the laundry, put it on this one couch that we have, and I fold it all out and stuff. I like to fold laundry.
Okay.
To me, that's just it's
soothing.
And nobody else in the family likes it, and I'm like, I'll do it because I don't mind doing it, and it's kind of zen for me. I used to fold laundry all the time and watch TV at the same time when I was young, so for me, it's sort of a zen thing. And so I'll fold the laundry, lay it on the couch, and it could be just one pair of socks, and she'll lie on that. Guaranteed. All right.
Question@avrant.com.
Yeah, I already said that. That's fine.
That's the one.
Do we need the rest of it? avrant.com. That's the website, all that stuff. Facebook.com/avrant podcast. I mean, it's just, you guys can find us. You know where we are. Go to AVRant. Click on the links. They're there.
YouTube.com/avrant. That's an important one, so you can see our smiling faces and the occasional photographs.
Scowling face in my case. I mean, come on. Let's not oversell it.
You do tend to frown when you're reading, so that that is quite often.
Which is what I'm doing a lot of during this podcast. Oh my goodness. So yes, contact us. Question@avrant.com. You don't need anything else. You're fine. Don't worry about it. Just there's like 700 episodes.
That's true.
All of them have the contact information except for this one. I'm just gonna spend more time talking about not talking about it than actually talking about it.
That is definitely what has happened right now.
That's what's happening.
Yep.
So we want to thank our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, you support the podcast in one way. One of the ways you can do that is going to patreon.com/AVRant podcast. Sign up to become an ongoing, contributing, supporting, monthly, subscribing listener person.
Yep. You'll be a patron.
That's an acronym. There's an acronym in there somewhere that's not offensive. I don't know what it is. I didn't either. I don't know. I just say words. So we want to thank our 132 patrons over at patreon.com. Thank you very much.
Yeah, patreon.com/AVRant podcast. If you would like to sign up for an automatic monthly donation, getting up to 132 at the end of the month, and it put us at a very nice round number according to what it's tracking. That's not what we actually receive since they take a cut, but that's still what the pledge is. It's a nice round number.
We also want to thank Jack for sending Rob an Amazon gift card. He's very happy with the 77-inch C1 OLED purchase. Hopefully it lasts as long as this Panasonic Plasma did. Cross your fingers, buddy.
Yep.
Who knows?
That is definitely the correct upgrade to have made, though. When you're coming from a Plasma, you want to go OLED. He went up in size to 77 inches. I don't foresee anybody being disappointed by that move. So, Jack, thank you very much for the Amazon gift card. That was super nice of you.
I just realized that I put my phone on silent, and then I went in there to make a phone call, and then
it's not on silent anymore.
Now it's on silent anymore.
I should check mine. Mine's on silent.
I got mine's in the other room though. I gotta go in the other room. But anywho, hopefully my condenser mic will not pick it up. It probably will. We got some notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going during this ongoing and I guess hopefully subsiding. Are we hopeful now? Are we hopeful? I mean, I feel like we're
in North America.
hopeful.
The numbers are tending to trend in the correct direction, not nearly as quickly as I would like for them to do so, but it does seem
numbers
to be.
in my area are quite. I mean, I'm in Florida, so it's always a dumpster fire here, but it's like on one side of the dumpster.
Okay.
I mean, not like from the States. I'm just saying, like, I feel like it's further away from me than it's been in quite some time. Things are feeling a little bit more relaxed. Like the general level of stress in my family has reduced quite a bit.
That is good.
So, yeah. All right. Anyway, so Brandon sent us another gratitude. Cody said, "What bike did I get for my birthday? I got a Coratec. Coratec's a German brand that they make a lot of gravel and mountain bikes, but they also make road bikes, and they're a kind of a different brand. They don't sell a whole lot. There's one reseller here in town, well, in my immediate area that I went to, and that place loves that brand. Okay. Like, I didn't buy from them, but they are like, they don't make a bad bike, is what they said. I was like, well, great. I'm going to go buy one from somebody else because it's cheaper.
Oh, man.
Sorry, guys. It was like less than half. Less than half.
Yeah, that's pretty significant.
I mean,
Haggling
it's like
probably wouldn't have got you there.
Significant discount. Like, well, and the one they had was like brand new, and it had a few more upgrades than the one I actually got. But I mean, the one I got had been in the shop for a couple of years, and it just hadn't sold because it was small, and I'm small, so it just hadn't sold because it just wasn't right for all the people who had looked at it. Much, to my benefit. So. So Cody, I got a Coratec. Raul says we are always on this playlist during his Sunday chores. I got that honeydew list. David, Weldon, Charles, who says he's been listening for about a year and he loves it. Snoop Augie Dog 95. What? On Twitter.
Yes, that is a handle. I don't have your name. Just put your Twitter handle. That's it. We know who we're talking about.
At Snoop Augie Dog 95. I wonder when they were born. I wonder
there might be a clue in there.
They're probably my age. Probably. Anyway, he says we ended up saving him thousands of dollars because he originally thought he'd need a new flat panel for gaming, plus a projector with a roll-down screen that could come down in front of the TV for movie time. Sounds like somebody spent some time on Reddit. But we discussed the Epson 5050UB's very decent input lag times, and that got him to test the input lag on his older TV that he's used for gaming for years. The Epson was actually way better.
Yeah.
So he went with a fixed frame, and now he can game with a huge image and lower lag than he had before. See, that's a thing about lag, is like hardcore, like super competitive gamers, it probably makes a difference.
Oh yeah.
But for most of us, we don't even notice it because we're not there. The only time I've ever noticed lag is with rhythm games.
Sure.
That with rhythm games, lag is like super noticeable. It's extremely important. But once you sync it up, up the lag, I mean, as long as you're not being competitive, with other people, once you sync it up, it doesn't really matter. So, if you are if you fancy yourself a hardcore competitive gamer, which a lot of people I mean, this goes for the cycling world too. A lot of people dress and buy bikes as if they were on the Tour de France, and I'm like, dude, you were never making it. I mean, neither am I. But you know, and I've got all the clothes too these days. I got all the spandex these days too. So we won't buy
it
the
hasn't
talk.
been
But they
that many years since it was like readily available information to see exactly how many milliseconds of lag there's been. I mean, it's been around for a while, but
sure.
Basically since the Leo Bodner lag tester made it much easier to do that test, that's when we've been getting these numbers. And then everybody started panicking when their milliseconds weren't down into the single digits. And it's like, maybe that low. It's your reaction times. Well, who knows? There's some people out there who are literally counting individual frames in like 60 frames per second games, and I don't know how they do it. So for those people, okay, it matters. But for us mere mortals, anything around 25, 30 milliseconds is going to seem absolutely fine, and that's where the action lies.
And that's, you know, when you're doing like a speed run of some game and you need to do, you know, frame perfect tricks in order to get things done. Okay, input lag is important to you.
If you are paying a turn-based RPG, then it is not going to matter.
I think you'll be fine. I think you'll be all right.
Yeah, you can do that via streaming.
I like people are playing like those like turn-based RPGs or things like that where the speed doesn't matter, and they're like, oh, I'm dropping frames. It's like, who cares? Who cares? Who cares that you dropped a couple of frames? Who cares?
So
this is where having the information up in the top right corner of how many frames per second you're getting and your input lag and all these other things that's up there. I think it just makes people crazy. Like, it's better not to know.
Yep.
You'll be happier. You know? Just why when you buy new gear, you should get off the internet.
And repeat the names. Brandon, Cody, Raul, David, Weldon, Charles, and Snoop Oggy Dog 95. Thank you all very much for the notes of gratitude, for the notes of encouragement, and a big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
In the news, Denon officially announced 3 new receiver models. Finally, after we all found them anyways.
It's official.
So the rumors of an October announcement were kind of true. Mm-hmm. Oh my God, my phone is ringing.
Ah, yeah.
I'm sorry.
I'll carry on with the news. That's all right. Yeah, we had heard the rumors that there would be Denon announcements in October. That is true. These are announcements, but it's not quite the ones we wanted to hear about the most. These are all the least expensive models in Denon's lineup. So they are starting at the entry point of their lineup and working their way up from there. So, of course, we had already talked about the S760H that had sort of leaked ahead of time over at Costco, and people had managed to buy it early, but now there has been an official announcement and a product page. So once again, the S760H, that is a 7.1 channel model. It is 7.1 channels only. You cannot expand it any further because it does not have any pre-outs aside from its 2 subwoofer outputs. Those 2 subwoofer outputs are in mono. That's not dual independent subwoofer outputs. So it is 7.1. That's what it is. The headline feature, of course, 3 of its 6 HDMI ports are HDMI 2.1 with 40 gigabits per second, one output.
Gee, that sounds familiar.
Yep. And that does also get a new feature, which is the dual speaker presets when you run Odyssey. So you can have 2 separate runs of Odyssey. You can run it twice. Maybe it's, you know, some people have always asked there, like, I want to optimize for my front row and then have a second save slot that optimizes for my back row. You could do that. Or, well, what we just talked about, if you do have a flat panel and a screen that comes down in front of the flat panel, one run could be screen up, the other run could be screen down, or curtains open, curtains closed, whatever it is. It's nice to have that and be able to easily switch back and forth. So that is a $550 receiver.
There you go. Oh, okay. And below that, they got the S660H. Mm-hmm. It's a 5.1 channel model with the same 3 HDMI 2.1 inputs, and the main attraction, I guess the inputs of the main attraction is $450. Yeah, which is pretty inexpensive these days.
That's pretty reasonable, and 5.1, and sometimes that's all you need, and it's nice that you can get all the latest HDMI features and still have Odyssey. It's regular Odyssey, Mult-EQ.
Yeah, I was going to say.
It's not anything higher than regular Mult-EQ, but that is nice. It still has 2 subwoofer pre-outs. They are in mono, but you can connect 2 subwoofers, and we kind of want to run them in mono anyway, so yeah, I think that's pretty nice for a nice entry-level price.
So we got the X series as well, the X1700H. It's almost the same as the S760H, but it gets obviously multi-Q XT, not the 32, but XT.
Yeah.
It's got Zone 2 pre-outs and some custom integration features for $700.
Yeah.
So, there you go.
They also claim it's 5 watts per channel more powerful. The S760 is rated at 75, and the X1700 is rated at 80. Wow.
One they rounded down and one they rounded up. That's how that works,
I
in
looked
case you're
at
wondering.
the weights that are listed on the specs page, and they're identical, so I don't think they beefed up the power supply.
No, I don't think so.
Or if they did, they took something else out. That doesn't make any sense. So, I think they're pretty darn near identical. But yeah, those are the new ones, and I just wanted to make the note of, again, the model numbers seem like a clue to me, because why this is the X1700, because there was an X1600 that came out in 2019. In 2020, we got an X2700, but we didn't get an X1700 to replace the X1600. The X1600 basically got replaced by the S960. And then there was no 750 replacement in 2020. So now we've got the 760 replacing the 750. We got the X1700 replacing the X1600, the models that didn't get any updates in 2020. Here are their updates now in 2021, but they didn't make them the X1800 and the S770. They stuck with the same, ending numbers as what already came out in 2020. So once again, I'm going to take that as an indication that I think the models that we care about most, the 9 and 11 channel models, probably are not getting an update in 2021.
I don't know.
Yeah. And I mean, they brought out the, the adapter boxes, the SPK618 to give you the properly working 8K. And then they've brought out now the 3-in, 1-out. So I think that's their solution for, your X2700H, 3700H, 4700, 6700. I think that 3-in, 1-out HDMI switch is their solution, and I wouldn't be holding my breath for an X3800H, for example, this year.
Right. Yeah.
Just putting the pieces together. I think those model numbers are.
We'll see. Either that, or they just let the engineers do the model numbering, and
that's right.
It's just
weird to me.
Sense to human beings.
All the stuff that ended in a 60 or ended in a 700, they all came out in 2020 prior to these ones. I guess this is catch up, but they get the 8K inputs, the 3-in, 1-out, so that's a big feature advantage. Yeah, a little bit strange.
This comes from Brandon, also still news, but comes from our listener Brandon. Lovesac Seating has debuted their new sectionals with StealthTech.
Oh, they're not sectionals, Tom. They're Sactionals because it's Lovesac.
Geez.
You've got to get
Sactionals.
That right. Very important. StealthTech by Harman Kardon.
I know why they're called Lovesac. I know that. I know they're big beanbags. I get it. I get what they're going for here.
I don't even. Are they beanbag things? I don't know.
They are basically.
I don't know.
The ones I've seen are.
Okay. Anyway.
Sactionals with StealthTech sound by Harman Kardon.
Yes.
Which the biggest surprise here is that Harman Kardon's still making anything, to be honest with you.
Yeah, they're owned by Samsung, so, they got money now.
Speakers are embedded in the two side sections of a Sactional couch, both front and rear, as well as a subwoofer that can be installed within the frame of any of the seats. So it's modular, so more rear speakers can be added if you choose a wider design. In the separate sender can go up front so that dialogue actually sounds like it's coming from the right location. It appears to only support Dolby Digital 5.1. Lovesac claims it isn't just good surround sound, but superior surround sound that you can hear and feel without all the clutter of visible wires. It's all controlled via an app, and the MSRP is $3,700. For $3,700, it better be very... Let me look at this.
Well, I mean, it is the couch as well, so... it's not as though...
Where's the couch? I don't see the couch in here. I see the speakers.
Right.
Where's the couch?
You probably have to watch the video. I grabbed the things from the video, but yeah. I mean, it's a couch. It's their modular system couch where, the base is its own piece, and then the cushion that goes on top is its own piece, and then the backs are their own separate piece. So it all comes in this sort of modular construction that you fit together, and then the arms that go on the side, they have a speaker at the front and a speaker firing upward at the back. You can add more speakers that fire upward along the back if you have a wide couch. And then, it's still the regular bass, and the integrated subwoofer gets, you install it into the bottom of the seat there yourself. So this is something that can go into any of their compatible systems, and $3,700 is the couch and the speaker system, the basic, I think, 3-seater with fronts and rears and subwoofer and center. They did mention the center comes with it, and they definitely show the center separate by itself underneath a screen up at the front of the room. So at least that's not coming from, I don't know, your feet.
I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the Sactionals are a couch.
Yeah.
But they do have, I mean, their claim to fame were beanbags, basically.
Okay.
Like higher tech beanbags. I know that Clint reviewed one. I've sat on one before. It was a beanbag. I mean, come on. How good can it be? Let's see here. Carl, Roku and Goku. Roku and Goku. Okay, so
is that Dragon Ball? That's Goku.
That's Goku.
That's Dragon Ball.
So there's some meme I saw, and it was like, you know, like Goku and the boxer in a ring, and the other, no, it was just two boxers, and the other one boxer just puts his hand back and goes Kame, and the other guy goes, I quit, because even if he can't do it, I can't risk it, I'm out. Right. So, anyways, Roku and Google are still fighting, and it might result in YouTube app being pulled from the Roku channel store. I thought it already had been, once their current agreement expires in December. So, you know, enjoy it while it lasts. That 2-channel goodness. The main dispute was actually over YouTube TV, not standard YouTube. Roku removed the YouTube TV app, but then Google did a workaround to add YouTube TV into the standard YouTube app on Roku. So
Roku was not happy about that.
Oh my God, dude. It's like kids.
Yeah.
If I have to pull this internet over, that's exactly what it sounds like. YouTube, stop. I'm not touching him. I didn't put it in there. What is that? He already had the app. It's not my fault.
Mm-hmm. God, yeah, Roku is claiming that Google is like demanding that search results lead to YouTube videos first, and then they want to like get a whole bunch of information that Roku normally gathers and keeps for themselves, and Google's like, hey, you got to share that with us. And anyway, they're fighting about all this kind of stuff, and it would be kind of interesting to have a Roku and have no YouTube of any kind available on it. I mean, YouTube TV, the dedicated app, that's been gone for a while now, and that ultimately is still what they're fighting over the most. But yeah, Google did that kind of shady workaround. They're like, well, you're not going to get rid of the regular YouTube app, are you? So we're going to stick YouTube TV in there. And yeah, that might all come crashing down in December. So maybe you'll have to use something else that can watch YouTube. Who knows if there are any other devices besides Roku's that can. Maybe just a few.
There might be one or two.
Maybe.
Can you get Apple TV on a non-Apple TV device? Can you get the Apple?
You can get Apple TV Plus, the service, their streaming service. Absolutely.
The streaming service.
They're on everything now. Yeah.
Okay, I'm just making sure. My wife has finally gotten word of Ted Lasso.
Okay.
And she wants to watch it.
Yeah.
So I was like, Foundation series.
That's right. Yeah, well, both seasons of Ted Lasso are done now. Foundation is still ongoing, so maybe wait a couple more weeks until that's like really close to being completed. And then, yeah, $5 for 1 month. That's not too bad to watch all of that. That's pretty reasonable.
There's no way we're going to power. She does not binge watch.
Okay.
That's not going to happen. And in fact, she's not going to probably want to watch Ted Lasso until we're done with Modern Family, which has a bajillion seasons. And
that did eventually end, didn't it? Yeah, that show's not going anymore. So
I don't know.
There are a finite number, at least. There is a way to count down.
We're towards the back end. I don't know how far through it we are, but we're towards the back end. Why can't everything be like that Creek show from your country that I'm not going to say the first name of?
SCHIIT, Schitt's Creek. That's all right. It's okay to say.
That I know, but you know, you do all the cursing, you foul mouth Canadian.
That's right.
But
we are foul mouthed. I'm unusual.
Three seasons and done. That's perfect. Comments from our listeners. Brandon again. Jeez, Brandon. God. First of all, he says he loved our take about his dual PC 4000 subs and worrying about port chuffing. Speaking of which, I'm in the midst of reviewing a portable Bluetooth speaker, and it has, for lack of a better word, it looks like the cap from was it Nageline water bottle? You know, those kind of screw-on caps.
Not really. Okay.
Anyways, it has like the screw-on cap on it, and I was like, "What is underneath that thing? You fill it with water? I mean, is it actually a portable speaker?" No, that caps off the ports. And I was like, "Well, I guess if you want, it's supposed to be waterproof and everything else, or weatherproof or whatever." And so I get it, and I connect to it via Bluetooth, and I start playing, and I plug it in because I want it to charge. You make sure I have enough battery on it, and plug it in, and I start playing stuff through it. I'm like, what is that noise? Apparently, the ports that are hidden behind that cap, which you have to have the cap off to plug it in, they are completely open to the inside of that enclosure, and it's just like whistling Dixie. And it's making so much noise. I was like, what is wrong with this speaker?
Wonderful.
So I had to unplug the charging cable so that I could put the cap back on so it could sound normal. I'm like, right, put that down in the con section.
Yeah.
All right. Brandon's whatever. He got the subs set up and he tested them with the edge of the opening of Edge of Tomorrow. If he had kept turning up the subwoofers any louder to try to make their ports chuff, his house might have needed to be rebuilt, but the subwoofers didn't have any issues. So he might have had a point that he didn't need those PB16 Ultras after all. Yeah, we know. We're aware. We know how right we are, and we're often very right.
On that part, we were pretty confident.
Some things we will have opinions about. That was not an opinion. That was an objective fact. That was we had no problem saying that. Second, he recalled how quite a while ago one of our listeners mentioned how they finally noticed a timbre mismatch between their floor level speakers and their overhead speakers. It was during the movie El Camino, the follow-up to the Breaking Bad TV series, when Jesse was below ground and Todd was above him. Okay. Brandon tried it out, and he definitely noticed how Todd's voice had a different timbre coming out of his Golden Ear ceiling speakers versus his Ascend Sierra Raul front speakers. Well, if you're looking for a timbre mismatch, you found it. Yeah, because those two speakers are nothing alike. But Brandon had never ever noticed such a mismatch before, so he was skeptical. He rewired his setup so that the overhead channels were now playing out of his Ascend speakers at ear level. Same model of speaker playing all the sounds. His timbre mismatched was still there, so he tried playing it in just 5.1, and the timbre of Todd's voice still changed depending on the camera angle, so it's just part of the sound mix. Maybe there's a scene out there where a timbre mismatch between your fronts and overheads will matter, but this particular scene probably isn't a good test. That's actually a good reminder that just because something sounds different in one speaker versus another doesn't necessarily mean it's because of the speaker. It could be that's what they were going for. They wanted there to be the timbre mismatch was like, well, it's coming through the floorboards or whatever cave. I don't know where he was. I didn't see this show.
No.
And therefore it is going to have a different timbre because of that. So we're going to mix it that way. Bob's your uncle.
Yeah. As Tom alluded to, if you heard a genuine timbre mismatch between some Ascend Sierra speakers and some Golden Ear speakers, I wouldn't question that, because those I mean, if you put both of them up at front playing the same thing and A/B compared them, and you're like, yeah, blind, I can tell those apart 100% of the time. Like, I wouldn't question that because they do have a different sound. But as overhead Atmos speakers, where Tom and I have frequently said, you can put just about anything up there as long as it can just play the sounds, and we're not going to be too concerned about
and
it.
not even all of the sounds, just most of the sounds.
Above 120 hertz at least, and up to about 8 kilohertz will do you. So as long as you can do that, we weren't too concerned about it. So it's interesting because, saying, oh, I found an example where I clearly can tell the mismatch between fronts and overheads, but then it turns out, that's actually just in the sound mix. So that was really good of Brandon to check that out. And
thank you.
Yeah, I'm sure there are other examples, but don't put all your, don't go listen to this and go, oh, that's why I have to have identical speakers on my ceiling too. That wouldn't be the way to convince yourself in this case.
I'm sure there's an audiophile out there someplace who's trying to figure out how to lash tower speakers to a ceiling.
We know Chris's friend who's putting the Aperion bookshelf speakers up on his ceiling. We know that's happening.
Ryan heard Chris H talk about the Panasonic Ultra HD Blu-ray player and wanted to mention that the UB820, normally $500, got down to $350 last year for Black Friday. So maybe just wait a month at this point, and if you want all the features but a more affordable price. And I would just caution everybody that supply chain issues are really bad, and you're waiting for
this
anything
year,
right now.
Maybe Black Friday won't be so Black Friday. Isn't
Walmart doing a thing where they're like, if you are a special Premier member or something like that, you get Black Friday 4 hours early
or
or something. I heard that.
Yeah,
on,
I mean, I know
think that
Walmart's doing whatever their thing is to compete with Amazon Prime now, so
Right.
I'm sure that's what it is, whatever their yearly membership thingy is. I guess so.
Yeah. All right. Lastly, Jonathan with the CDEN 4.0. Just wanted to give a shout out to our theaters. What?
Our theaters. Yeah.
Our theaters.
Yeah.
Okay. And he says, the owner is great to deal with, and that's where Jonathan goes for his home theater seating needs. He thinks the Fusion Escape seats that he's gone with are fantastic. They sound like they come out of a Ford car, but I bet they don't.
No. Fusion seating has been around for a while. They're not crazy expensive. They were sort of a competitor to Brookline back in the day. Our Theaters definitely has not updated their website in a long, long time. They still have
it's very MySpace.
They still have the Brookline seats listed, and those have been discontinued for a long time now. So yeah, their website could probably do with some updates, but I have no question that the owner is probably a very nice person to deal with who is into this stuff. Seating is what their focus is. They design theaters as well. So our theaters, that's the word theaters with the letter R in front of it. It's not O-U-Rs, the letter R in front. And yeah, there you go. A recommendation from Jonathan.
On to the questions. Noah just finished repainting his home theater, and he's trying to nail down final placement for everything. Overall, the room is 19 by 13.5. But it isn't a perfect rectangle. It does have a door to make it enclosed, though. He sent a diagram and a couple of pictures that are not what the room looks like now. They were actually from the previous owner, and they give an idea what the room looks like, just in general.
Yeah.
So he's planned for 3 theater seats, basically in the middle of the room as a primary viewing area. That's a love seat against. There's a love seat, I'm sorry, against the back wall. But that's not a priority at all as far as speaker placement goes, which is good because it's gonna suck back there. Because I've sat back there before and it sucks. This looks like the ceilings are 7.5 feet. If I didn't say that before, I did not, because he didn't say that. It looks like he has a whole bunch of Klipsch speakers. So
yeah, that's coming up next.
Wow, this looks a lot bigger. These pictures make this room
picture?
look a lot bigger. Yeah.
There you go. It's good you have the diagram and the measurements. Yeah.
Fisheye lens, man. Helps you out. So we got a full set of 7 Klipsch reference Premier speakers already. He loves them and wants to stick with them. He just needs to figure out what to do with the in-ceiling Atmos speakers. They aren't a major priority to him, so he'd like to keep the price down. He was thinking that either the Monoprice Alpha series or the black back Monoprice ceiling speakers that appeared to cost about the same. He wants back cans, and it seems like the black back model, that's so hard to say, already has them. If so, they cost less in total. Is there any other big difference? Which in-ceiling speakers do we think he should get? For Klipsch speakers, I mean, you're going to be sitting close to them, so I wouldn't worry about sensitivity as much as I normally would with Klipsch speakers. So these are both good options, I think.
I just wanted to make the clarification that the black back Monoprice in-ceiling speakers are not fully enclosed. They have a back on them, but they're still open around the sides.
Oh yeah, I've seen speakers like that before.
Yeah, so they are not actually a full back enclosure. And yeah, for that reason, I would suggest in this instance, I don't have any problem, as we just talked about, with the lack of importance as far as timbre matching goes with your Atmos speakers. I am completely on board with this. I think it's perfectly reasonable, but I would recommend going with the Alpha series, and I would suggest to you go with the 8-inch model, because that's the only one you can get the metal back cans from Monoprice, is the 8-inch model. So we're still looking at under $200 for the pair when you get a pair of the Alpha's 8-inch speakers and the $75 per pair back cans to go along with them. You're still under $200 a pair, so probably not going to beat that for in-ceiling speakers. And yeah, I think that's a perfectly reasonable way to go.
So he asked, what do we think about his proposed locations? And this is for the Atmos speakers. A few feet in front and a few feet behind the main rows of seats, and meaning all 4 in-ceiling speakers are actually in front of the love seat at the very back of the room. That love seat at the back of the room, pretend it doesn't exist as far as where you put your speakers.
I mean, it's the lays about couch when something not that important. He said himself it's not important back there, so I think what my
love seat at the back of my home theater does? It holds all the blankets.
Right.
That's what it does. Yeah. My family loves to have blankets. I'm the only one who sits in here and I'm like, what are you people doing? It's 1,000 degrees, and they're all bundled up. My son never wears clothes. He's 15 years old. He walks around in his underwear constantly, and they'll have a blanket on in here. I'm like, go put some clothes on. So
Yeah,
this placement. So he's got them at, I mean, it's hard. I don't know if this is really to scale. So it looks very much like they're only a couple, like maybe 3 feet in front of 3 feet in front of and behind where his head would be on the 3-seater couch there.
But with 7.5 foot ceilings, 3.5 feet in front, 3.5 feet behind is basically perfect. That gets you your 45-degree angles more or less. It depends a little bit on the height of your seats and the height of you, but you know you're going to be within that range if you do that. So 3.5, 4 feet in front and behind, that seems completely reasonable to me.
Yeah, it looks all right.
Yeah.
And the rest of the speaker locations look about as good as they're going to get.
Yeah.
To be honest with you there. Scrolling down. How should he label the 4 in-ceiling speakers? They sure look like they should be top fronts and top rears, right? Yes, they do look that way. Though we have talked again about how you should label your speakers for Atmos speakers in order to get DTS-X to work the best.
Yeah.
And that's front heights and rear heights.
I mean, the thing is, like, what if he's never using Ultra HD Blu-rays? Because where else are you getting DTS-X besides Ultra HD Blu-rays? If all you're watching is streaming services, if it's streaming services, then it's going to be Atmos. Now, the thing is, if you label these, so I agree, visually, that looks like top fronts and top rears. If you go by the Dolby diagrams, they'll say label those speakers top fronts and top rears. And if you do that, and the only immersive audio you ever listen to is Atmos, that'll be completely fine. It is if you use DTS-X per chance, then it does a better job if you label them. You don't have to physically move them where the diagram shows them. If you just label them as front heights and rear heights, then DTS-X works better with that configuration. And since the placement locations, the range of angles that are allowed for front heights versus top fronts and rear heights versus top rears overlap, the range of angles overlap, particularly at the 45-degree mark, it means that if you do label them front heights and rear heights and you listen to Atmos, you don't lose anything. It doesn't mess up the steering. Nothing goes wrong. So leaving them as labeled front heights and rear heights is the most compatible with all of the immersive audio formats. If you happen to have Oro 3D in one of a Denon or Marantz receivers, it works for those too, whereas the top fronts and top rears don't. So the label of front heights, rear heights is the most compatible across all the immersive audio formats, and it doesn't mess anything up in Atmos, so we're fine with leaving it that way, even when physically it looks like they're top fronts, top rears.
Yeah. I think you can basically, I mean, like Rob said, you could switch them to the front heights, rear heights, or you could just not worry about DTS
if the only immersive audio format you ever use is Atmos, either way is fine. Either way is fine.
Yeah. Jay wants to upgrade his Denon S500BT receiver. It doesn't have any room correction of any kind. I didn't even know they did that. He's got a 5.1 Polk speaker setup along with a TCL R625 TV. Shopping at Costco and saw they have both the Denon S750H and the 760H. 760H costs a bit more. What are the differences? Which version does he need for a setup? And are there any differences between their versions of Odyssey? I think their version, I mean, it's just straight up multi-Q, right?
It is still multi-Q in both cases, but as we mentioned in the news, the S760 does get the dual speaker presets. The S750 just gets the one run of Odyssey. So if it would be handy to you to be able to run Odyssey twice and have slightly different configurations, then that is something that the S760 offers. They do have the manual for the S760 available now. They don't seem to have the 660 or the X1700 up on the manuals, up on the website as of the time we're recording this. But the manual for the S760 is up there. So, I mean, the only other obvious difference between them is the HDMI ports, right? The 760.
There is no world in which I'm going to recommend you get that 750. I'm going to be honest with you. I mean, I know that you don't need it yet.
Right.
But it's all about those HDMI inputs. I don't care about the Odyssey that much.
That's the killer feature. They can both use the Odyssey editor app, so you have the option of saving and loading configurations via the app if you do it that way. But yeah, the two presets on the unit itself can sometimes be handy. But yeah, it's all about having those three HDMI 2.1 inputs on the 760. But then he's like, does he actually need that? And in his case, since the television he's using right now is an R625, You don't,
Right.
because that TV doesn't have any HDMI 2.1 inputs. That's all HDMI 2.0.
But that's just the thing. I mean, how often do you upgrade your receiver?
Yeah.
And the fact is, not very often. I mean, your last receiver didn't have anything. I mean,
Right.
how old is that receiver? It can't be very recent, because I can't remember the last time Denon put out a receiver without something on it.
Yeah, the 500 series sometimes didn't, and that's what his was a S500 BT.
So, I would spend the extra couple dollars, $100 or whatever it is, to get the 760, just to make sure that you've got those 3 HDMI 2.1 inputs are just about everything you're gonna need for like the next 10 years, probably.
Yeah.
You're gonna upgrade your TV and not notice a difference right away, because you don't have a source that's doing all the stuff. Right? And then you're going to finally upgrade your source, and then you're going to, if you didn't get the receiver that the 760, suddenly you're not going to be able to do all the things that you're going to want to be able to do, because now you've got access to all of it.
And adding
might as well
external HDMI 2.1 HD Fury costs as much as one of these receivers, so that's not really the best solution to do things that way. So yeah, I err on the side of being slightly more future-proof. I don't think the difference in price is massive, because the 760 is coming in at a pretty attractive price, $550. But strictly speaking, for the equipment that he has right this minute,
currently own, yes,
then you do not need it, because your current television is HDMI 2.0. So that's about as clear as we can make that, I think.
I would agree with that. I would agree that you don't need it right now, but I still would buy it. Martin plus some stuff from Shawn. Martin's from Ireland. So I would do an Irish accent, but I can't. So Martin's got a 77-inch LG CX OLED. He's been using his Xbox One S and his Ultra HD Blu-ray player for movies. It can be troublesome. He's had to uninstall and reinstall the Blu-ray player app a few times to get it working. He can live with that, but it's obviously not ideal. For what? I don't understand.
He's using his Xbox One S as his Ultra HD
as
Blu-ray
his
player.
Ultra HD Bluray player.
The Xbox One S.
I've never had to uninstall. Yeah, I get it.
Oh,
I mean, I've never had to reinstall that app. Never. I've never had a problem with it at all, which is weird, because I'm usually the kind of person that does. He's heard us mention that how none of the Xbox or PlayStation consoles support Dolby Vision for Ultra HD Blu-ray disc playback. Is true. And then the Sony players do, but in a ridiculously stupid way that requires you to manually turn Dolby Vision on and off.
Yep.
So what's the best Ultra HD Blu-ray player to get? Do you actually have to go all the way up to the Panasonic UB820? It's kind of expensive, which then raises the question, do we really need Dolby Vision? Compared to HDR10, would he notice it in a side-by-side comparison? In theory, if you had, depending on your display, HDR10 could look better than Dolby Vision in theory.
Yeah, there were a handful of, well, particularly there was a model from Sony that just didn't handle Dolby Vision signals correctly and always looked too dark, at all, no matter what you did.
But Dolby Vision is... So, I don't remember. Did he tell us what TV he has? He did.
He's got a,
he did.
He's got a C10 OLED, which does have frame-by-frame dynamic tone mapping, which tends to make HDR10 look a whole lot nicer and retain all the detail. I mean, before we get into any more of that, I'll touch on a few more things there, but it's key that Martin is in Ireland, because the players you have available from Panasonic in Ireland are different than what we have available to us in North America. In Ireland, you have access to the UB450. That is not a model that we can get in North America. We have the 420, we have the 820, we do not have the 450. And the 450, let's see, what did the 450 do? The 450, unfortunately, dropped the HDR optimizer. The 420 has the HDR optimizer, but the 450 dropped it, but it added Dolby Vision support. And if what you want is take what's on the disc, including Dolby Vision, and send it out of the player to my television, and don't do anything else, don't touch anything else, but have the smarts to automatically switch to Dolby Vision when it's Dolby Vision, and switch back when it's not Dolby Vision anymore. The UB450 is exactly what you want, and it certainly costs less than the 820. So since that's available to you in Ireland, I think that's where I need to point you for this one. I'm not particularly worried in your case with a C10 OLED about the HDR optimizer, because if you are watching HDR10, you have the dynamic frame-by-frame tone mapping built into your OLED. So you don't really need the HDR optimizer in the player. Your television can already do an excellent job of tone mapping HDR10. So I think the UB450 is the perfect model for Martin in Ireland to get.
Right.
It's too bad we can't get it in North America.
Yeah, that's the problem. Even with the Dolby Vision update that you've got on the Xbox Series X and S,
right,
which doesn't do player still. It's only for games.
It's for games and it's for the streaming apps. You can do Dolby Vision on an Xbox Series or an Xbox One.
But it doesn't just send out the Dolby Vision signal and let your TV decode it.
No, it's player-led.
It's player-led.
It's player-led, yeah.
Which means it's not the best version of Dolby Vision that you can get.
Not entirely, yeah, because it's in practice, player-led Dolby Vision tends to just have these sort of set nit levels, and whatever's closest to, the television says, here's about how bright I can get, and it says, all right, you're sort of closest to this preset level, and that's what the player tone maps everything to and sends it on its way. So it's not the ideal implementation of Dolby Vision to do it that way. Yeah, let's see. Was there? I wanted to mention about that frame-by-frame dynamic tone mapping that your C10 OLED has. If you are a strict purist, for example, my favorite reviewer, Vincent Teo over at HD TV Test, he is personally not a big fan of LG's frame-by-frame dynamic tone mapping for one reason, which is that in the bright areas, it does a really good job. It retains the detail exactly the way that any purist would want it to. But in the dark areas, it brightens them up a little bit so that you can see the shadow detail a bit more easily. Now, personally, I understand where any purist is coming from. If you have gone to the extent of making sure that you have no more ambient light in your room than 5 nits, and you want to see it exactly as it was authored, then the fact that they're bumping up those shadow levels a little bit means that you're away from the true content creator's intent. But for me personally, subjectively, I find it really nice, because when I'm watching HDR, what I want is more detail. I want to be able to change between standard dynamic range and high dynamic range and see more detail. And that includes in the shadows, to me. So when they brighten the shadows just a little bit so that I can see a bit more detail down there, and they retain all the highlight detail, whether it's mastered to 1,000, 2,000, 4,000, whatever, they retain all that, I'm very happy with that. So, but that's a subjective opinion. But that is what's going on with the LG OLED dynamic tone mapping.
All right, Shawn might... Oh, this is a different person. All right,
different
Shawn,
person, but similar topic, yeah.
Similar topic. Shawn might also be looking for a new Ultra HD Blu-ray player. He bought a Sony X800 several years ago, but that was the original version without Dolby Vision, not the X800M2 that's being sold today. It's fine, but now it's having problems playing discs. They'll get maybe 15 minutes into a movie and just freeze and shut down. Yeah. That's annoying.
Very.
You would think that we would have this down by now. You would think that this would be not hard to do. So first of all, any ideas what's wrong? Should he try it for a repair? He's out of the warranty period now. And second, should he just get a replacement? If he should just get a replacement, should he stick with Sony or switch over to Panasonic? Much like Martin, he thinks the UB820 is a little pricey. He wasn't using Dolby Vision before anyhow. Should he get the 420? Or maybe the least expensive 150? Excuse me. So the first thing I would do, like I have, and I know this sounds stupid, when I married my wife, one of the part of her dowry was that she...
People don't do dowries anymore, but all right. I guess some people do. Some people must.
They do in India. I have Indian friends, and there is definitely a dowry involved in their marriage. I don't know exactly what all was exchanged, but I know that there was something. And even if it's just a ceremonial. Yeah, part of her dowry was that I got her CD collection, and part of her CD collection was a CD cleaner, and it just it had sprays and stuff like that. But the most important thing it had was just a disc that had like a brush on it. It just goes around. And I swear to you, I have fixed more broken CD, Blu-ray, DVD players with that stupid disc than I have anything else. So would it be worth it trying to get something like that, or just tried to clean it first? I think yes.
Maybe.
I don't know why it would get 15 minutes. It sounds like there may be a problem with the mechanism that moves the laser head over, and it gets so far and then it just gets stuck. In which case, yes, you should just replace it. But if it's not doing everything you want anyways, I don't know that you need to spend too much money on this.
Like I would probably go ahead and give Sony a call or an email, because that can't hurt. The worst they can tell you is it's going to be an out-of-warranty repair, and maybe you get the price point and you go, well, that isn't worth it because I can get a whole new player for whatever it's going to cost me. But I mean, doing the call or the email, that doesn't cost you anything, so can't hurt, because they might say, oh, yeah, we had a issue with, the optical drives or whatever, and they give you a replacement or something, or maybe the price of getting it repaired is worth it. So I would at least inquire about it. But in terms of getting a new one, so Shawn, being in North America, does not have the option of the UB450, which would have been nice. That would have been nice. But the thing is, I don't actually know what Shawn's display is. So I don't know if his display has, frame-by-frame dynamic tone mapping to go on HDR10, because outside of LG OLEDs, and then, Sony has some and Samsung has some frame-by-frame dynamic tone mapping. All of them handle it a little bit differently. So I don't know exactly what we're dealing with here. If one of the things you would like improved is retaining the most detail possible when you're playing back HDR10, then that's where the UB420 with its HDR optimizer would have the advantage, because the whole advantage there is that you're playing back HDR10 and it pre-tone maps to make sure that whatever your television is capable of, you instruct it. You say, I have a low or a mid or a high luminance display, and then it tone maps it first down to that setting, retaining all the detail in the highlights, and then your television will still apply whatever tone mapping it does, but now everything comes out at 500 or 1000 or 1500 nits out of that player at all times. There's no more 2000 or 4000 or 10,000 coming out of that player with the HDR optimizer engaged. So that would be the reason to get that one. In North America, if you do want Dolby Vision and you want it to work in a manner that will not drive you utterly insane, then you are looking at the UB820. There's really no other game in town in North America. But lastly, if you have a display that already does good dynamic tone mapping and you're fine not having Dolby Vision, then yeah, the UB150, honestly, I mean, it just takes HDR10 off the disc and sends it out of the player. Doesn't touch it, just sends it to your television. And there's not really a whole lot of reason to spend more if you don't need the player to do anything HDR-wise besides get it off the disc and get it to your TV. So yeah, I think hopefully that'll give you enough information to decide which one sounds good to you.
It all depends on why he wasn't using Dolby Vision to begin with.
Well, because he had an X800. That's why it didn't have Dolby Vision.
Well, I know, but if it's just because his player wouldn't do it, or if he wasn't using it because he didn't have a display could do it anyway, so that's why he got that to begin with. There's a lot we don't know.
Yeah, Shawn, if you have a Samsung, then you definitely don't need Dolby Vision because the television doesn't do it.
Right. Jack is having a heck of a time finding just the right seats for his theater. He doesn't really want theater seats, definitely not the typical row of recliners with the armrests in between each seat. He wants a more sectional style, but he needs to be really comfortable. Okay. He's already bought and returned a couple of sectional couches. If the seats can recline, that's great, but isn't a vital feature. There is no way I'm going to be really comfortable unless my seats recline. I'm sorry. That's just me. One issue he's having is that most of the default sectional offerings are either too small or too big for his space. He knows that our house, ARHAUS, has an option that he finds very comfortable, and it can be customized just the right size, but the lead time is 3 months, and it's stupid expensive. He's included a couple of pictures of the current setup to help visualize. The bar table behind the couch is 10 feet wide. Okay. His previous couch apparently is more of a bed.
It's pretty close. Yeah, it's a chaise lounge along the right-hand side, and then I can sort of see what he means because he's actually got 4 seats, but they're skinnier than usual in his current skinny one. He's got a couple of ottomans in front, so the entire thing, like Tom mentioned, kind of ends up being bed-like. And then he does have this bar table behind, and it sort of looks as though he wants a fairly low back on his seats if he's trying to replicate what he has right now, except more comfortable, because he's basically got the back cushions of his current couch at about the same height as the bar counter, and a lot of seats, the backs would be higher than the bar counter.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if that's a problem, but that would be something to be aware of.
Rob's going to have suggestions for you here, and I can see what they are because he has them there. But I'm going to tell you that you should the two things that you should do, which I think you've already done.
Okay.
Is you go to one of these places that sells a buttload of couches, and the thing is what they show you in the actual on the floor is what they think people want to see.
Okay.
Now, I have been in places where it's like they have something that looks like what you have there, right? And I didn't want exactly what you had there, what you have in your current thing, which would, let's pretend that, let's talk about something else. So it's a like a couch that it's an L-shaped couch, and it has like a the what do you call the longer one? It's
the chaise
lounge or whatever. And and I didn't want all that. I just wanted 3 recliners that or 4 recliners without arms in between that were a certain distance, certain width.
Yeah.
So we were walking around. We found stuff that we felt were comfortable and that were the right size for us, but the configuration was all wrong. So there's usually a book that's hanging down near them that has all the different pieces that you can possibly get. And when you take a look at that, you're like, okay, you find the 3 pieces you want and you say, can these 3 pieces fit together? And most of the time they'll try to tell you that they can't. Oh, well, that's not usually how we sell these. And I'm like, I didn't ask you for your opinion, Mr. Smart Pants. I just asked you if these things will go together, yes or no. And the answer is usually yes, and then you buy exactly what you want.
Especially for a sectional. Yeah.
Well, you've already done this, I think. You've already done this. You've gone there, and you've sat on... And this is the key with couches. And I've said this 1,000 times on this podcast. Don't ever buy anything you haven't sat on. It's just me. Now, you may trust Rob's suggestions, and I know that people have and have been happy with some of the couches that people have ordered online. I'll never do it. I just won't do it because I have sat in the couch, bought a sister couch to that one based on how it looked, which is because I didn't like the way the one looked. I wanted something that looked a little different, and then was miserable in it. So I will never do it again. So you have found something that you like, but you're like, but it's stupid expensive. Yeah. Right. But you like it, and this is not like a disposable purchase. It's not like you're buying something that's going to last, a year or 2 years or 3 years or 5. You're going to live with this thing for 20 years. Take that cost and then split it out over all those years or days or whatever, and it's clearly going to be worth it. So I say you buy the stupid expensive one. Go on.
If you have one that you like, then that is definitely worth something.
That is the end of the conversation as far as
so. I mean, as far as giving specifics for a sectional, I don't have great suggestions. I'm going off in his email. He's like, are there any of the home theater seating places that have, customizable sectionals that might work? That's as good as I can do because I'm only familiar with, and I won't say I'm familiar with all of them because who knows how many are out there, but I'm familiar with a few of the home theater recliner type places, and I'll try to, mention things that might work. So right now, Valencia home theater seating is very, very popular. You can, of course, do the individual seats, and even though they don't promote it on their website at all, and if you go to the sites that sell their pre-configured ones, they all do the thing with the arms in between each seat that you said you don't want. But if you actually look at, like Tom mentioned, their catalog, they do have armless recliners in all of their models. So you can make 4 seats across where all 4 of those seats recline. So, I mean, they don't have a chaise lounge option in their home theater recliners, but you can have all 4 seats recline. So you've got footrests for all 4 seats going across. And they do have some models that are a bit more narrow. They also have what they call their console seats, which is the 2 outside seats recline, the middle one doesn't, but the back of the middle seat can fold down, and that's where you can have like storage and your cup holders and stuff go in that center console. I don't quite think that's what he's looking for, though, if he wants something that's somewhat similar to what he's already showing in his images, because he doesn't have that type of console seating. So going away from Valencia, and I only mention them because they seem to be sort of the hotness right now, I actually think you might have more luck over at HT Market. HT Market has a whole series of their own HT Design theater recliners, and similar idea there. You can get them armless. You can put together whatever configuration of 4 or 5 and not have to have arms. They conveniently offer removable arms. So if you want the option of sticking an arm in there in between two seats and then removing it, they have that option too, and a good variety of different widths and heights to the seats that they offer in HT Design. But they're still not the full sectional. They're still, theater recliners that you're just pushing together. So they do sell Palliser over at HT Market. And Palliser has a huge selection of actual sectionals, including ones that look similar to this, like lower back designs, definitely chaise lounge designs, curved, straight, whatever you want. Some that are wider individual seats, some that are narrower. I don't know how much you've looked at Palliser. They're really popular in Canada because Palliser is based in Canada.
They're pretty expensive down here. That's for sure.
Okay.
I know. I looked at them down here. They were not a cheap brand.
Yeah, and I don't think they're as expensive as German Arhaus though that he was looking at.
Right.
Those ones are more than that. So,
but that might be the whole thing though, is that he because of the shortness of the couch that he seems to be looking for, he might end up with a European brand simply because that's the style over there, and it's not the style here. Our style here is like, we got a bunch of really, I don't know. It's always bigger is better here. I don't really get it. But I agree. I like the smaller couches as well.
Talking to the guys over at HT Market could definitely be beneficial because they know their seats and they are very, very helpful. So at least talking to them might steer you in a direction that I don't know about. There's also Theater Seat Store. It's another place that sells a wide variety of seats. They got a whole bunch of brands. They carry Palliser as well, and then other individual theater recliner brands. But one of the brands in particular that might be worth considering is Continental. Continental home theater seating. They can do full custom if you want to. Like literally you design a new seat that they've never made before, and they'll do that. Or you can choose from their available lineup. Continental is like what Gene from Audioholics went with, because he wanted one that had a really narrow headrest. He didn't want anything that was going to block any sound coming from behind. And Continental had a model with a really narrow headrest that's just wide enough for your head. Don't turn and try to fall asleep, because you'll fall off the edge of the headrest, but that is something that Continental can do. They're not cheap. Continental's not cheap, but if you want really custom and home theater specific, that might be an option.
Maybe you should shop Continental just so that our house stuff looks more reasonable.
Well, I don't know. I don't know which one is more expensive, to be honest, by the time you get it all put together. But those are some options from like home theater centric seating companies that I know about. I don't know if anything will truly be to your liking. There's no way I would tell you, oh, here's the seat to buy. I have no idea exactly what it is that he wants. So those are the options I can point you toward.
All right. Lance walked into his living room to find his LG C1 OLED had powered itself on while his Amazon Fire TV 4K was updating itself. He's got a couple of LG TVs and a Sony, and they all turn themselves on by themselves sometimes. Sadly, it has led to image retention on his OLED. Is there anything short of a smart switch connected outlet that will prevent his TVs from turning on by themselves? I think I wrote an article about this. But yeah, it's HDMI CEC.
That has got to be CEC. I can't think of any other reason why this would happen. That has got to be CEC. Now, here's the thing. I think in the Amazon Fire TV devices... I have an article called "Help! My AV Equipment is Powering On by Itself."
Yeah. That's the name of the article.
So first of all, do you actually need CEC? And he might, because if he's using HDMI audio return channel
for his sound bar or something like that, yes.
Definitely could be the case. Then, unfortunately, you pretty much always have to keep HDMI CEC turned on the television in order to get HDMI audio return channel, ARC, to work. So that might be the case. But if it isn't the case, and you don't actually need HDMI audio return channel, then turning HDMI CEC off in your television will solve this issue. Let's see. In Sony's, it's called Bravia Sync. And in LG's, what is it called? In LG's, I'm forgetting what their stupid name for HDMI CEC is now. Simplink? Simplink. That's LG's. They call it SyncLink. So in your LGs, you could look for SyncLink. In your Sonys, you can look for Bravia Sync and turn it off if you don't need it. But he was mentioning that, well, in this specific case, it was with his Amazon Fire TV. It might have been other devices in other rooms with the other televisions. Some devices give you more granular control over CEC, including sometimes the option of CEC overall is still on, but just the power command is separated. So like in AV receivers, that's almost always the case. In AV receivers, you can almost always separate whether all of CEC is on or just the power command is on or off, or just the HDMI pass-through, or, whatever. Individual things can be turned on and off. In some devices, you can do that. For example, in NVIDIA Shield, I know you can. You can individually choose. I think they even get as granular as the power everything on command is either on or off, and the power everything off command is separate from the power everything on command. So some devices let you do that. I'm not off the top of my head completely familiar with the Amazon Fire TV, whether it gets granular like that.
Yeah, if you do this though, and you've been enjoying using one remote to power everything on and everything back off,
certainly the case. Yeah.
Then you'll have to go back to turning things on individually. So
might I interest you in a Sofa Baton U1? Because
you're going to need a universal remote.
If your setup is simple enough that you're able to use one of the streaming devices remotes to control everything, then a Sofa Baton U1 for $50 can definitely do that. It can do all the same things as a simple remote.
We do need to address it's powering itself on, and now he's got image retention, because that suggests to me that something is not right in his image settings either. I would think that image retention shouldn't happen unless, even if it's on for...
the stupid little update bar sitting on there for a long time.
I suppose on a black background with a bright white, something like that could... But it shouldn't last for too long. I would think it would go...
The other thing is, after the update is done, even if everything is still on, which could certainly be the case... all of the streaming devices offer screensaver options. There's not a single one that doesn't have a screensaver option. To actually end up with image retention, it means it was on for a while. So
it'd have to be a really long time.
Yeah.
And then we would think it would be on a station or on a menu.
Yeah.
That is just...
So maybe go through and make sure your screensaver set, at least for your OLED, that your screensavers are set for 5 minutes at the most or something like that.
If I fall asleep in my home theater, which happens more often than I'd like to admit, my projector turns itself off. It's just like, nah, he's not in here.
And if you are using HDMI CEC, they'll have the thing where, again, on any of the streaming devices, you can set them to automatically go to sleep after a period of inactivity, and when they go to sleep, they'll turn your television off if CEC is active. So there must have been a little bit more going on here, Lance, where you've turned your screensavers off, made it so that it doesn't put itself to sleep, which I get it, because I feel the same way, honestly. I don't really like it when, I look at my phone for a little while and the stupid screensaver comes up. I'd rather just have the video, keep going. But those type of things, particularly just with your OLED, if you've had this issue. Also, run the panel refresh, because with image retention, the panel refresh honestly does work on most of those things. And I'm trying to envision how this could have been bad enough to be like permanent image retention. I'm not picturing it. I don't know how it could be that bad from, an Amazon Fire TV's menu being up there for several hours. I think the panel refresh will get rid of that. So try all of those things, Lance.
And if you haven't already, look up the recommended settings for your TV.
Yeah, you probably got that OLED light cranked up.
Yeah,
wouldn't surprise me.
I would take a look at that too to make sure that you're not in torch mode.
Yeah, if you keep the OLED light setting on an OLED under 40, then getting image retention is difficult. Not impossible. Yes. You play a video game long enough with a heads-up display, it can still happen, but it's difficult at that point.
Right. John appreciated that we went through all the hidden menu codes for LG OLED TVs. I must have fallen asleep during that.
Oh, that was with Lee.
Oh, there you go. He was particularly interested in the HDMI override hidden menu that lets you force the TV into a chosen color space, such as Rec 709 or Rec 2020. Mm-hmm. Is there a similar hidden menu option for the Vizio M series TVs? I just want to say, first off, you should never go into the service menus.
Yeah. So, I mean, in the case of the LGs, what we talked about, it wasn't a service menu. It was the regular user remote, and you can get there just with these codes. So those ones are fine because you can't do any damage in the user accessible ones. But service menu, you can potentially do damage.
Yeah. The service menus, a lot of times they are meant for professionals who know what they're doing, and they're like factory resets don't fix them. You know what I mean? You could permanently just, if you've ever gone into a display, started messing with the color, and you're like, I can't get it back to where I want it to be, like where it was. It's like, I've only made it worse. Imagine that, but not being able to factory reset it, because that's what going into the service menu does. Yeah. So because Rob tells you to go into the server or gives you access, or you do decide that you want to do something like this, so you get access to the service menus, do not change anything without writing down what the original setting was. Do not do it. That's what professionals do, and you're no better than them. So, I mean, the simple answer to this is no. In the Vizio M series, there isn't something exactly the same as what the LG offers. That hidden menu with the HDMI override stuff was kind of a big deal to content creators because it was something that normally TVs just don't have. You usually have to get a mastering monitor to get that kind of control. So it was a big deal when the C10 and the C1 have that option. So the short answer is no. The Vizio M series doesn't have that. I will provide a link to... Now, the link is calling it the Vizio service menu. It isn't really. It's still accessible with the user remote control, which means it isn't the actual service menu, the one where you can do damage. This is a hidden menu in the Vizios. You can go in there. You can look at the color space information in there, but you can't change it. So it's not exactly what you're asking for. But I wanted to mention one other thing. I suspect, because there's a pretty popular video on YouTube about the LG OLEDs and this hidden HDMI override value. I'm not going to say the guy's name because I don't want anyone to go and watch it, but it's Ant-Man's favorite word, so you can probably figure out who that guy is. Pretty much his entire point of his YouTube channel is just to be a contrarian and put out horrible misinformation that gets people to click. So it's not a good place to find any information there. And one of his recommendations was to go into here and manually put the OLEDs in Direct 2020 mode so that you get all the color that they're capable of. That is horrible advice. Don't do that. If you're actually watching something that is in Rec 2020 color space, like an Ultra HD Blu-ray or, Dolby Vision coming off of Disney Plus or Netflix or something like that, the TV goes in Direct 2020 mode. That's not a problem. You're not going to miss out because you didn't manually stick it into that mode. The auto color space works perfectly on the LG OLEDs. And then when you go back to standard dynamic range content and you're watching a regular Blu-ray or cable TV, you don't want your TV stuck in Rec 2020 color space because your colors will not look correct. They're supposed to be in the correct color space, and the auto mode that the TV is set to out of the box does that perfectly. So the horrible, wrong advice given by that YouTube channel, which unfortunately is very popular, and people are like, oh, I found a hidden thing that they didn't want you to know about. They've been hiding all the colors from me. Oh, Lord. But unfortunately, that information out, and I can't blame anybody. This is one of the problems with YouTube, right? We're on YouTube, and then a gazillion other home theater people are on YouTube too. Who's correct? Who's to know? All these things sound amazing. So if you believe us, then don't listen to that other channel. Okay. So John is interested in adding a mini DSP 2x4 HD or possibly the version of the 2x4 that comes with Dirac built in, which apparently is the DDR-C24. This would be for his headphone setup that uses a Grace balanced DAC with a Poop Audio Magnus balanced headphone amp.
SCHIIT. They use it too.
It's pronounced poop. Anyway, Mini DSP isn't selling balanced versions of the 2x4 anymore, so which XLR to RCA adapter cable should he use? I know that Rob's got a specific suggestion. The last time I needed something like this, I just went straight to Amazon and ordered whatever looked like it was. Now, I know you can't just do that. You have to be a little bit careful.
A little bit careful in converting XLR to RCA because there are 3 pins in an XLR connection, and there are only 2 parts, the tip and the sleeve of an RCA connection. And you want to make sure that the pins are wired correctly. Now, when you're talking about a pre-out, which is what we're talking about from a DAC, that's a pre-out, right? When we're talking about that, we actually want there's like one of the pins that we just want left dangling. We don't want it connected to anything. And almost all XLR to RCA cables that you'll find on, like, including Monoprice and Amazon, they are wired for a microphone adapter. And those ones will couple two of the pins together and then have the other one. And you don't want that with a preamplifier. You want one that leaves the third pin dangling. So the one I feel comfortable recommending is from Emotiva. It is an adapter. It is not an XLR to RCA cable. It is female inputs on both sides. All right. So it gets a little bit hinky because you're going to need more cables than this, but this does it properly, and it's only $8, so it's not ridiculous to get a pair of these. But in your case, you're going to need 4 of them, and then you're going to need 4 RCA cables, because it's going to be RCA in and out of the mini DSP going into this female RCA adapter from Emotiva. Now, you can then plug the female side of this directly into the device that has the male XLR inputs, but the other device is going to have female XLR that you're going into, so you're going to need a male to male XLR adapter on 2 ends of these as well. So it's not super simple, but it's totally fine to do that. He questioned in the email, is like, is having all of these connections going to mess anything up? No. Not going to mess anything up. What could mess something up is just going and getting an XLR to RCA cable that has the 2 pins wired together that shouldn't be coming out of a pre-out. So that's why I feel more comfortable, as convoluted as it ends up being, doing things this way. Because RCA cables are cheap and male-to-male XLR couplers are cheap. So it doesn't really end up being expensive. It's just a little bit weird to have these things all hooked together.
And as far as configuring the mini DSP, he's a Linux guy, so he doesn't have a PC with Windows or Mac, so that's convenient. But he was thinking he might pick up a 10-inch Fusion 5 Windows tablet. So would that be sufficient for setting up the mini DSP? I don't know.
I don't know for sure. I have no experience with the Fusion 5 tablets. When I saw the price, I was like, oh, is this going to be one of those ARM-based ones? The Windows on ARM, in which case I would feel very uncomfortable saying that it would be, but it's not. It's an Atom. It's an Intel Atom processor, which is a low-powered mobile processor, but it's still an Intel processor that is running regular Windows 10. So as long as it has a USB port, it should work. I mean, the mini DSP software is not like some kind of resource hog. You know, there's not much going on in there. It's just configuring some settings and then uploading it to the mini DSP device. So I don't really foresee why this shouldn't work, but I can't promise that it will.
Seems like this is a very good question for mini DSP, the mini DSP people. I mean, they should be able to tell you that.
Well, I don't know how familiar they are with a Fusion 5 Windows tablet. They should be
able to just look at the specs and say whether or not.
But I'm also thinking, like, you can probably get a used Windows laptop for very little money from somebody. Like, it doesn't need to be powerful to run the mini DSP software.
Right.
And that,
I mean, these things aren't expensive anyways. These Fusion 5s are like less than $300.
That's why I was looking at it. And that's why at that price I thought it was going to be one of the ARM-based ones. But yeah, I'm not seeing why it shouldn't work. Intel Atom processor, as long as it has a USB port, it should. It's running regular Windows 10, so I think it's okay. Buy the Fusion 5 from someplace you can return it if you're going to do it.
He was also thinking he might like to add Dirac to his surround sound setup. He's using an Outlaw Audio 976 Pre-Pro that he still loves, 976. But he's never been happy with its built-in parametric EQ. The thing is, he doesn't want to spend more than $600. He knows he could get the DDRC 88A and put that between his Pre-Pro and his external amps, but that unit costs over $1,000. He's really only worried about his NVIDIA Shield as a source. So is there a Dirac unit from an DSP that could just take the HDMI output, or maybe even an USB output of his Shield, apply Dirac, and then feed that into his Outlaw, all within the budget he's hoping for? Can I say no? Because what you're looking for is like a receiver. You're asking for a receiver basically to go between the two and apply. Well, I mean, I guess a standalone processor. But when was the last time we had a standalone SVS sold Odyssey processors for a little while, and we haven't really seen anything that does this on this level. I mean, that's why it goes between the amp and the processor, because
or the amp and the amp. The amp and the pre-pro.
Amp and the pre-pro.
Interestingly, there kind of was this device about a year and a half, 2 years ago. Mini DSP used to have a device called the Nano AVR, and I think it was about $700. I can't recall exactly because they don't have it on their website. They've scrubbed it like it never existed from the Mini DSP website. But this was an HDMI in, HDMI out. Now, it was HDMI 1.4 only, so that was part of the issue because they never updated it to 2.0, let alone 2.1. But it did exist. There was the Nano AVR. Now, it was not a decoder, so you had to put 7.1 PCM from the source into the Nano AVR. It would apply Dirac inside the Nano AVR and then send 7.1 PCM via HDMI back out. It was never hugely popular. I can't find anyone selling them on eBay or AudioGone or anywhere because it doesn't seem like too many people were on board with this because most people want decoding for whatever they're going to plug their source into. And NVIDIA Shield has the ability to output multi-channel PCM, so that wouldn't have been too bad. But the after talking all that up, the answer is no. You can't get that Nano AVR anymore. And if you did, you'd have to use like a Sewell siphon or one of the HD Fury devices to separate the HDMI audio from the video, because like I say, that Nano AVR was stuck at HDMI 1.4, so it wasn't going to pass through what your NVIDIA Shield can output as far as 4K and HDR and all that. So it would have been a bit of a convoluted thing and probably would have cost more than $600 even if it did exist. But it doesn't, so let's put that out of our minds. You can't get that Nano AVR anymore. Like I say, even used, I can't find them anywhere. So yeah, I don't have a solution for this. I mean, there is the DDRC-88A. That takes the pre-outs from your Outlaw, does all the processing, and then sends new pre-outs that have been applied by the Dirac unit to your amplifiers. But yes, it is over $1,000. So the thing I wanted to touch on here, though, is you've got 10 bands of parametric EQ per channel in that Outlaw. He said, okay, he tried it and didn't like it, but I'm like, wait a second. Like, I believe you. You tried it and didn't like it, but you can do a lot with 10 bands of parametric EQ. Like, I'm thinking it's not that the EQ is bad inherently or something. Like, whatever was done originally wasn't to your liking, that's fine. But there is a lot of flexibility you can do with a 10 band per channel parametric EQ. So I think what you should do, if you're set on sticking with Outlaw, because the Outlaw is, it's 7.1 only. It doesn't do any Atmos or DTSX stuff. So if you wanted to upgrade there, then I'm probably just going to point you over to that Onkyo, right? The $1,400 RZ50, because that's got Dirac built in and it does 11 channels. So if you're going to do that kind of upgrade anyway, to me, that's what you do instead of an outboard device. You can still use your external amps with that because it's got a full set of pre-outs. But if you're sticking with the Outlaw, I would get you to invest in a measurement microphone, go over to our friend Herb at Cross Spectrum Labs and get a individually calibrated U-Mic 1 and get Room EQ Wizard, which is free software, and use Room EQ Wizard to calculate after your measurements, parametric EQs. In fact, I think the Outlaw 976 is even one of the options in the menu where you say, what EQ do I have? And I think it's in there. If not, you can just use a generic 10-band parametric EQ. But let it do the calculations. Let it figure out what the curve should be, and then you enter them into your Outlaw. And I think the results you can get from that's going to be way less expensive, and I don't think you've fully utilized and optimized what can be done with what's already built in there.
Right, you get that calibrated U-Mic 1 and Room EQ Wizard. I think it's I agree. I think that's the best solution here.
What, $120? It's much less.
Yeah, and time, whatever your time's worth.
Well, sure,
because it's going to take more time than your Dirac would. Nick wants a new pair of desktop speakers. He would like them. He would like for them to have a headphone jack built in. He looked at Audio Engine's lineup, since that's the brand we seem to recommend most often for desktop speakers. They have their HD3 model with a headphone jack. Those use a 2.75-inch Kevlar woofer with a 0.75-inch, a 3/4 inch silk dome tweeter, 15 watts per channel, Class AB amplification with Bluetooth, RCA, USB inputs, along with a subwoofer output. They seem like a nice size and feature set for what he wants, but they cost $350. Now, Nick also knows that Monoprice has a lineup of Monolith desktop speakers. The Monolith MM3 have a very similar size and use a 3-inch polypropylene woofer with a 3/4 inch silk dome tweeter, 15 watts per channel, Class D, but only Bluetooth and RCA inputs, no USB, and no subwoofer output. They have a headphone jack, though, and only costs $160. Then for $250, the Monolith MM5 offers the USB input and subwoofer output that the MM3s are lacking. They are physically larger, of course, and use a 5-inch polypropylene woofer, 65 watts per channel, AB, Class AB amplification. There's even the the MM5R version with a folded ribbon tweeter that still costs less than the Audio Engine HD3 at $330. So what do we think? Will the Monolith desktop speakers sound about the same as Audio Engine HD3 at a lower price? I think I blew the tweeter on one of my Audio Engine speakers.
Oh.
I think it's gone.
That's too bad.
Yeah, I just noticed that because I'm doing a review of some Fluence. They're not really desktop speakers. I mean, they are, but they are meant more for like connecting to your TV, or they're they're basically bookshelf Bluetooth speakers that are self-powered, but they act very much. I'll talk more about them as the review goes on, because I just set them up yesterday. But those are much bigger. They're almost the size of a normal bookshelf speaker, and they're rear ported and everything. So I'm not really sure that that's appropriate for this. We've never heard these.
Yeah, that's the problem.
So that's the real problem. So you're asking us to tell you if they're going to sound the same as the thing that we have heard. I will tell you that the Audio Engines belie their size when it comes to how loud they can get and how clear. I have never been disappointed with the sound until I blew the tweeter. The sound of the Audio Engine speakers at all. I've always been happy with how they sounded. So in that, I can and I've heard more than one type. More than one size. I'm sure these Monoprice ones are fine. I don't know how they would compare in the AB. They certainly, for the price, seem like I would go with them.
Yeah, like maybe give them a try, because you can do a return. They do take returns. You'll be out some shipping, but I mean, if you can wait until they start showing up on Amazon too, because sometimes that stuff shows up on Amazon, then you'll get the free return shipping, even though that's right.
Somebody's paying for it. It's just not you. So yeah, I guess that's what I would say.
Right.
It's very hard for us to tell you that to try something what something's going to sound like just by looking at the size of the drivers and the type of amplification it has. It means very little. I mean, there's so much more that goes into it. Yeah,
I mean, there's the objective material difference between Kevlar woofers and polypropylene woofers, but that really doesn't necessarily mean anything.
Doesn't necessarily translate to sound quality, that's for sure.
Definitely not. So I mean, the best I could do is there are several reviews of the MM3s and the MM5s and the MM5Rs that are out there, and I read a selection of them, and there does seem to be a pretty strong consensus that Monoprice has designed these with a fairly noticeable high frequency roll off, which honestly, if you're going lower price, perhaps less expensive tweeter materials, that's not a bad design decision at all. Plus, these are pretty much meant to be desktop speakers, so they don't really need the treble to be like completely flat and extended when they're within 1 or 2 feet of you. Having a bit of rolled off treble is often a benefit, particularly if you're going to point them straight at you, which a lot of people do on their desks. So I don't have any issue with that, but there seems to be pretty strong consensus across all the reviews I could find, across all 3 of these models, even the ribbon tweeter model, that they've been designed with a high frequency roll off, which I say makes all the sense in the world, but that seems to be pretty consistent. But the other one, the slightly troubling one that again, there seems to be pretty strong consensus about these, is that they have a noise floor. that seems to be mentioned in multiple reviews of these Monolith desktop speakers, that they have a noise floor, which is not uncommon with inexpensive built-in amplifiers in self-powered speakers, you know, and you are within a foot or two. So if that thing produces any idle hiss, you're going to notice it at that small of a difference. And that's what's happening. You know, I saw multiple reviews mention that they're like, yeah, when you're just sitting there and nothing is playing, there's an idle hiss coming out of these speakers. And I'm not...
That would drive me bonkers. I've never heard that with Audio Engine.
Right. I'm not shocked by that at all. That's not shocking. It's pretty darn common for self-powered speakers. Now, was that just because these were early review units, which is what most of the reviews are, and maybe that's improved in the actual production run when they mass produced it? It's possible. Sometimes that happens. The early pre-production units aren't, you know, identical to what you can end up buying. So we haven't heard them. We can't say, but those are the two things that stood out to me in the reviews, mainly because all of these reviews actually agreed, which is unusual. You don't usually find reviews across the board that agree on a couple of things like that. So that seems to be the case. I don't know. To me, the price is so low that I'd be willing to take a flyer on them and just return them if I don't like them, to be honest.
Right. Alex is running a 5.2.4 setup using his Denon X3700H. He wants to expand to 7.2.4, so he needs an external 2-channel amp, and since he just wants to power the rear heights with it, he's going to go with the Fosse that we always talk about.
Yeah.
He just wanted to double-check the proper physical connections and settings. He would use the Height 2 pre-outs on the back of his Denon 3700H, correct?
Correct. If what you want to do is power the rear heights, those are the pre-outs, the Height 2 pre-outs.
In the Denon settings, he would make sure the pre-out setting is set to Height 2, and then he would have to rerun Odyssey, correct?
That is all correct. I just wanted to clarify because this always trips people up. There is that pre-out setting when you set your amplifier assigned to 11 channels, because that's what you have to do. If you want to do a 7.2.4, you have to set the amplifier assigned to 11 channels, and then that will open up this one other option that isn't there when you're at 9 channels or below for the pre-out option. And under that area, you'll have two choices, fronts or Height 2. Those are going to be your two options. And people get confused because sometimes they're like, I just bought a 5-channel amplifier and I want to power 5 of my speakers externally. How come I don't have any option to say those are the pre-outs I'm going to use? So the way to conceptualize this is there are 9 amplifiers built into the AV receiver. There are 11 channels of pre-outs. All of the pre-outs are active all of the time.
Right.
There's the little caveat with the X3700H, which is that you can actually put it into full preamplifier only mode, and then it turns off all of the internal amplifiers. But even in that case, the pre-outs are still active. So the pre-outs are active all of the time, all of the pre-outs. What that pre-out setting, where your only two options are either fronts or Height 2, that is saying, I have 9 amps built in, you can use all of those, but you chose to an 11 speaker setup, so 2 of your speakers have to be powered externally, because I only have 9 amps built in. So which 2 have to be powered externally? I'll let you choose either your front left rights or your rearmost overhead speakers, the Height 2s. And in your case, since that's what you want, you'll set that to Height 2. But I wanted to make that clear for everyone.
Right. Lastly, he asks, is there a particular position to which the Fosse's volume dial should be set? If Odyssey ends up setting the rear height trim levels to a negative number, should he turn down the Fosse's volume dial? Should he aim for a 0 trim level? So in general, you should turn it up to max. Generally speaking. To start. And then you should not do anything and just listen for a second in a quiet room and see if you hear any noise coming through your whatever speakers are being powered by your amp. This is true of any amp.
With the rear heights wired to the Fosse. Just have it powered on and then just leave it idle there for a second and hear for if you're hearing any of that hiss, what we just talked about, noise floor, right? If you're hearing an idle noise floor, and if you have the Fosse's own little volume knob turned up literally as high as it can go, if you were to hear some audible hiss, we wouldn't be surprised at that. That's the case with most amplifiers. Most amplifiers, if they have their own gain knob or their own volume knob, and you literally turn it as high as it can possibly go, having some noise floor is pretty typical. So that wouldn't be unexpected.
And then you would just back it down until you don't hear that anymore. And then when you don't hear it anymore, run Odyssey. And if Odyssey sets it to -12, or 10 or whatever it is, that's the lowest number on your receiver trim level, well, then you've run into an issue. But with overhead speakers, unlikely to be the case.
Right.
Unlikely to be the case. And I swear, I do not know what's going on with the internet these days where people think trim levels are somehow indicative of a problem with your speakers. And
somebody said something somewhere.
Somebody has decided that you cannot have positive trim numbers or negative trim numbers. The trim numbers are important. No, the trim numbers mean nothing as long as they're within the operating range.
Within the range.
Okay.
If you've gotten all the way to the maximum or the minimum, then maybe we'll look at something. Then you got a problem. But if you're within the available range, you're perfectly fine. So you do not need to aim for 0. But like Tom says, you turn it all the way up. You're hearing a bit of noise floor. You back it down just a little bit until you're not hearing that noise floor anymore. It doesn't have to be dead silence with your ear 1 inch away. Similar to the noise floor from any of your other speakers that are being powered by the Denon. You get it down to there. You run Odyssey. If it does set it to like -12 in the trim level, then you probably want to back down the volume dial on the Fosse a little bit more. But that probably isn't going to happen. And then never touch the volume dial on the Fosse again. Make sure it stays where you have set it.
Right. That's the important bit. Like take it off or something. Infinite Gary. LG originally said a smaller 42-inch OLED model would be available this year, but now they said that will come out in 2022. Who could have guessed? And as we mentioned last week, it seems as though a new 97-inch size might come out next year. Do we foresee them expanding the ranges of sizes even further? Gary might actually be very interested in an under 40-inch. How would we know? How would we know this?
Well, sometimes there's weird little rumblings out there, but not the case here. I mean, the 97-inch was a surprise to me when we talked about it last week.
So when they tell you the biggest size, you can maybe think that some even number of that might be a size they might come out with. You know what I mean? Where you can divide the panel that they're making into smaller panels. You might see that, but I mean, I wouldn't really expect. We have no clue.
No,
and I don't really understand why anybody wants a under 40. I mean, for a video on the boat. I mean,
I don't know.
It's
maybe
it's
a
like
kitchen.
a computer monitor.
Sometimes kitchen desk people want something smaller.
That's what computer monitors are for, man.
That's actually just it, because we have some pretty good OLED computer monitors now. They're not the same technology. They're not the WRGB OLED. They're not the LG display television OLED technology. They are like RGB OLEDs from Samsung or their AMOLEDs. But we have some pretty darn good OLED computer monitors now that are in the 32 and 36-inch sizes. So I think that's where you need to look here. I think they're a horrible value because they cost more than a 55-inch LG TV to get down to that size. But if that's the size you need, then that's where you're going to go. I was a bit surprised they planned on a 42-inch at all. I thought the 48-inch, that's basically a 50, and a lot of people do want a 50. 55 is just a little bit too big. I thought that was kind of reasonable. The 42, I was a little surprised at, honestly. Do you really need a 4K 42-inch OLED TV?
Well, I mean, what is he mastering? Video? Is he using it for operating, robotic teleoperation or something like that? I mean, I'm sure it exists out there. I'm sure it's not cheap.
And some of the other podcasts that are in Europe or they're out of Asia, and they're talking, the housing sizes are much, much smaller than they are in North America, and there are people who want that smaller screen size, and that seems to be what LG is targeting with that 42. I would not predict smaller than that, but then again, I wouldn't have predicted the 42 myself. So I'm not going to say it's impossible, but I have no idea. I haven't seen any announcements, and I think what you need is under 40 inches. Look at one of the computer monitor options.
Yeah, I would. That's what I would go to. So Gary enjoyed an article over Home Cinema Choice that goes through some of the best and worst home theater innovations that have come and gone. They include things like 3D TV, including the glasses-free prototypes, curved TVs, which are still out there, truly universal disc players that could play both Blu-ray and HD DVD, which lasted for about a hot second. The very first consumer OLED, Sony's 11-inch XEL1.
Yep.
I don't even remember what that is. I don't remember those. Sound bases, which are still out there, and I do still like them. And the CED format that tried to compete with Laserdisc but used a physical stylus. How could that possibly go wrong?
Your movie gets worse every time you play it. It's exactly what we wanted.
So can we each think of a best and worst? I can't because this is the first time I've heard this question. So can we each think of a best and worst to add to the list of bygone home theater tech? I mean, can we say vinyl? Well, I'm going to piss people off if I say vinyl, right? Reel-to-reel cassettes. I loved cassettes when I was a kid, but
They're
even
all
when I was
back
a
and
kid,
stronger than ever, according to their fans.
well, as much as I loved making mixtapes for people and recording things off the radio because that's how old I am, sitting there by the radio waiting for your song to come. I remember I had one cassette tape that had like 5 copies of the Ghostbusters theme when it was hot. I would just wait by the radio and then press and record as it was, and you get the person talking over the beginning of it. It was terrible. The quality was sucked, and but the portability was very, very good. They were cheap, and they were ubiquitous. I mean, it was everywhere.
Yeah,
so I mean, I definitely preferred cassettes, and even when CDs first came out, I was like, I don't know about this CD, and they got the writable CDs, and I was like, I don't know about these writable CDs, but the reality is any medium where you can buy it and it slowly degrades over time is just not good. Not really
I guess
good.
it could lead to mini disc. All of that was leading to mini disc.
It was, yeah.
Honestly, that should have been a bigger deal than it was, but
it should have been.
Yeah.
I liked the discs too. They were chunky and had their own little cover thingy on it, so they were protected from the elements, unlike CDs, which
that's right.
Were just all open. So I did like mini discs. Never had the player, of course.
One that came and went. My best that has come and gone that I wish were still around. I wish they had kept going with it. Was Windows Media Center. I'm like, it's a shame that home theater PC is really kind of died out with the death of Windows Media Center. I think that should have stuck around. For my worst, I'm going to say DVD audio, which it's going to tick off a very, very small number of very specific people.
I have so many of those things.
You have DVD audio discs?
Yes, I do.
Oh, no way.
Because I reviewed them for a while.
Okay.
I reviewed them for a while for Audioholics back in the day. They sent me a whole bunch of them. So I've got these DVDAs that they had images up on the screen and sometimes even music videos and stuff. But for the most part, it was static images that would be up there as you were listening to your music. So I have like a Blue Man Group. I've got that's the only one I remember. But I have more. I have other ones too.
Right. But yeah, DVD audio to me, like, having a format war with SACD for what was already a small niche product, I'm like,
wasn't even niche. It was like minuscule,
and I mean,
like a little speck of a
SACD is still kind of around a little bit. There's definitely still fans of SACD. I don't personally know any continuing fans of DVD audio.
No.
I guess I know Tom now, but I wouldn't consider himself an advocate for it, I don't think.
I don't advocate for anything.
So I don't. The only, honorable mentions to component video cables. That's what came off the top of my head because those came and went basically.
Right. I guess since I already mentioned it, and that's that freestanding Odyssey box that SVS made for a hot minute.
Right.
I really felt like that had a lot of potential. I was very excited about that, and then they just immediately stopped selling it.
That's right.
And I understand why. I don't think anybody bought it. So there it is. Dazz says, thanks for putting his mind at ease about his +3 trim level. What is it with trim levels these days? I'm just so mad. He had noticed that when he is manually checking the trim levels for each speaker, there's a loud click that comes from his receiver when he switches to certain speaker channels. It sounds like a physical noise that's coming from the receiver itself at the front of the room, not something coming from any of the speakers. What is that? Is it a cause for concern? I mean, it's just a click.
It is a relay. It is an electrical relay inside of your AV receiver. When you have one of these 9 or 11 channel receivers that has the ability to switch which channel is being powered, there is an actual physical electrical relay in there. It is a switch, and that's what you're hearing. Because when you first go into the manual speaker settings, it just puts everything at default. That's where it starts, the relays. And then if you have programmed whatever, something to use zone 2 instead, or something to use rear heights instead of surround backs, something along those lines, then that physical relay is going to click over. And you hear it. It is a ka-chunk sound. It is sometimes quite loud. It is no cause for concern. It should happen.
Right. As we discussed previously, he wants to put a couple of absorption panels over a window on one side of his room, right at the first reflection point. He's decided to have this panel behind his curtain to hide them from view. The panels are a standard 2x4 foot, but the window is taller and wider than that. So what method do we suggest for hanging the acoustic panels? They need to float in front of the window somehow. String.
Picture wire hanger.
Picture hanging wire, and you can either put it above the window frame and then make it long, the right length.
Yeah.
Right. Or you could put two hooks to either side and then string it around that way. Those are the two ways that you could do it. Either way, I think works.
Yeah.
It's going to be slightly problematic, but to figure out how long of a wire you're going to need. But it shouldn't be that hard. I mean, that's the way I would do it. I just use the wire hanging method. So
I'm thinking because he's making these panels himself, so that's fine. You're making the standard 2x4 shape that you've already meant. It shouldn't be like, because he's saying, okay, the window well that he's trying to fill is larger than 4x4, I guess, because he's going to have two 2x4 panels next to each other. Is larger than 4x4. So he kind of wants this, like it's floating within the window. I'm just thinking if you just have some little extensions on the top and bottom so that the panel itself can have something to rest against the frame of the window, like it's all going to be behind your curtain anyway. So, because I'm just thinking if it's literally just hanging off of a picture wire, then yeah, it's kind of dangling there and the bottom might be like, moving into the window well. If you just have a little physical extension of some kind, literally a couple little sticks with some, rubberized tape on the back of them, just so that there's something physical to go against the frame of the window, and it shouldn't need to be. I can't imagine the window is way larger than 4x4. So I would just add those on there, and then picture wire across there and hang it that way.
Lastly, I think it's lastly. Yes. Lastly, he asks, what's our SPL, or sound pressure level meter of choice these days? Now, it used to be back in the day, everybody always recommended the Radio Shack one, but of course, Radio Shack no longer exists. So the key here that you're looking for is the ability to do slow and C-weighted. Those are the two things you want to look for. And if you go to Amazon and you start shopping, you will find very quickly that most and many do not have that. So you need to have the ability to set it to C-weighted and slow measurement.
Yeah, there's a lot that are A-weighted only.
Yeah, and you don't want that because it's too dynamic. You need to be able to see like the average over time.
It's too small a range. A weighting is only going from about 500 to 5,000 hertz. That's a small range, and we care about the bass, so we want something that at least gets down into the bass. Yeah, so we can point you to our friends over at Cross Spectrum Labs because they sell individually, or not calibrated because they're not like changing it, but calibrated in the sense of they're making sure it's very, very accurate. And then they actually give you a correction file so that if you wanted to use this meter as a microphone, you could, because they compared its response against an extremely accurate microphone. Then they actually give you a correction file. So that is the Galaxy CM140, which you can buy normally, but is a little bit weird because most places are selling the Galaxy CM140 for $130, and then Cross Spectrum Labs, with all of this additional work, sells it for $125.
There you go.
So,
let's call it verified, not calibrated.
Yeah.
Verified.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they do the little tweak of making sure it's spot on because it is slightly adjustable. But yeah, $125. So, I mean, I will stand by that all day long, but that's probably a little bit more than a lot of people want to spend on an SPL meter.
The Radio Shack one was what, like $35?
It was about $40. As I recall. So the one that I think will do the job and be nice for most people comes from BAFX. It is their 3370. You can get it directly from them. They used to sell it on Amazon, but I didn't see it listed on Amazon.com. But you can get it directly from them for $55, and I don't think that's insane. That seems pretty reasonable. A lot of people have used this and reviewed it, and it is well accurate enough for what most people want for a handheld SPL meter, and it does the C weighting and it does the slow response. So it has the things we want. If you just want the cheapest and smallest possible, the little Trip Lite Sonocheck, it is a very small, very simple to use device, but at least it does have the option of being C weighted. It's $45, so it's not tremendously less expensive, and it's not quite as accurate as that BAFX one. So that's why the BAFX for $55 is probably my favorite. Those would be the options.
All right. Paul and Weldon. Paul bought some of the Monoprice Alpha in-ceiling speakers that we've talked about earlier in this podcast. But they got the 6.5-inch size, and Monoprice doesn't seem to have a 6.5-inch back can available for those, which is what Rob just said. They've got the 8-inch back cans, but he still wants to stick with the 6.5-inch speaker size, which I don't blame him. I think that I like 6.5 inches, but better than the 8. This is for a room on the top floor, so the ceiling is... So above the ceiling is this attic, which is unfinished. What would be the consequences if he installs the speakers without any back cans? Are there huge downsides? What should he do for an alternative? So there are alternatives that you can do as far as buying pre-made back cans. But my solution in this situation would be to install them and then see.
Oh, well, I have to caution that in attics, in many municipalities, there's actually code involved.
Right.
And you're not, so usually, like, if you're a basement theater and you're installing an in-ceiling speaker between your basement and first floor, some places demand that you have a back can for that for fire safety reasons, but most places don't. In an attic, though, you almost always have to have a back enclosure for any recessed can lights, for any in-ceiling speakers. If what's behind them is your attic, I don't know many places that don't demand a fire break. You have to have a fire break.
So my second thing was going to be, but maybe it should be my first. Oops, I hit the camera.
Yeah.
The first thing should be just take some 2x and MDF or whatever scrap wood you have.
Yeah.
Build a box around it. You can find out from Monoprice what they suggest the cubic size be, but really if you just build a box around it, use acoustic caulk or any kind of caulk really to make sure that, or appropriate caulk for attics, of course, but to make sure that it's sealed up, and then fill it up with insulation. I think that's the cheapest solution.
Yeah, anything that would work as a standard fire break. So that can be 2x4 framing with some drywall, because that's what your ceiling's made out of too. So that's perfectly fine as far as code and fire break goes. That might and probably is the cheapest solution. If you want something that doesn't involve like construction and you just want something that can retrofit into the holes that you've drilled into your ceiling, Dynabox does, or Dynamat does have their Dynaboxes back. I like those, but they're $100 each, which is pretty darn pricey. That's more expensive than the speakers you just bought. But these are like a collapsible Dynamat material that you can roll it up, put it up there, it expands back out above, and then you can seal it back down. And it does work as an appropriate fire break because the Dynamat material doesn't burn very easily. If you just want a collapsible fire hood, strictly to meet code, you can get like $10 per piece fire hoods that can go, like they're meant for recessed lighting, but they'll work for an in-ceiling speaker too. So if this is just about meeting minimum code and you don't care about, any of the acoustic properties or whatever, this is to keep the insulation out of the back of the speaker and make sure you're meeting fire code by having a fire break, then the collapsible fire hoods for like $13.50 is the one that I linked to, so not too expensive. One that I would probably prefer, and this is basically what we just talked about, building something out of a wood and drywall lined box, but if you don't want to build it yourself, you can go to ISO Store, and for $60 each they'll sell you their Quiet Box, which is a box. You can install that above your attic, so that could be another solution too.
All right. Paul is trying to make some DIY absorption panels. He wants to use rock wool, but his local Home Depot and Lowe's are all sold out. Ordering from Gick or Acustamac would wipe out the cost savings of making his own panels. And the email to rock wool went unanswered, so any ideas on where to buy locally? So what I ended up doing when I did mine was there are, and this is true of most, I don't remember, is this Paul from Canada, your Paul? The race car driver guy?
No, this is a different Paul, and this Paul that we're talking about, I'm pretty sure is in the States.
Okay, so depending on where you live, there's usually some sort of building supply store or insulation supply store within a radius of your house. And that might be a 100-mile radius, but it's going to be within a radius of your house. And there are lists online that you can find. It's not necessarily easy because I went to look for one just right now while we were while Rob was talking about the last thing. Nothing came up really quickly, but they do exist. So I would even go so far as just to get on Google Maps and search for insulation or HVAC or something like that, and even calling a local installer and saying, hey, where do you get your rigid fiberglass board panels?
Well, this is the thing, because he was specifically talking about Roxul insulation.
Yeah, but why not Owens Corning as well? Because it's the same thing.
Yeah, that's just it. Well, it's not the same thing. It's a different material, but I was thinking, if he went to Home Depot and Lowe's and specifically looked for Rockwool, like, were they sold out of all insulation, every type, fiberglass insulation too? Because if you're building a frame for your DIY absorption panels, like, we like Rockwool. It's very easy to work with. It keeps its shape, but you could even go with, flexible fiberglass insulation, your regular pink batting stuff. Acoustically, it works just as well. You're just probably going to want to put, like, at least fabric backing, maybe some webbing or something to, like, hold it in place a little better, because it does, squish and fall down over time. But as long as you can, like, put it into the frame and have something that holds it in place a little bit, there's no reason why you can't use just regular fiberglass insulation to do this. And that could actually be even cheaper. Or if you get the slightly rigid fiberglass insulation, then it works just as well as Rockwool. It's maybe not quite as easy to cut, but you don't have to.
Right.
If you get 24-inch on center and 4 feet high and you're making 2x4 panels, you don't have to make any cuts, so who cares?
So the big problem with using the regular insulation, of course, is kitting it to stay in place and not fall back down. And a lot of it comes with a backing that you can't.
Yeah, if it's the paper backing type, probably don't want that.
So you end up having. I don't know. I like the rigid stuff and it's simply because it's so much easier to work with, and you don't have to worry about falling down within the frame. Yeah. So there are some benefits, but yes, if you haven't shopped for Owens Corning, the 703s or 704s or whatever it is, make sure you do that as well. But there are, I was living in Jacksonville at the time when I made my panels, and there was a place on the outskirts of town that sold me a box, and it was they don't normally sell. I literally drove up to the loading dock, and they're like, "Oh, you, Tom?" I'm like, "Yeah." Like, okay, well, here's your box. Nice. Like, okay, and that was it. So it may take you a little bit of doing, but depending on where you are, there should be something, because it's a material that local builders use. Yeah. And it should be available somewhere. And even if you can get it, like, I just shopped at Lowe's for it. I just looked at Lowe's for it. I couldn't find the rigid fiberglass. I found like rigid fiberglass backed plastic, which was not what we would want. So make sure. I've always had a problem finding it at Lowe's and Home Depot, full stop. Weldon also wants to make some DIY panels, but he's in Canada, Newfoundland specifically, and he's unsure what type of insulation to buy. He's got many types available at his local Home Depot, and options are overwhelming. So what does he need? He intends to make his own frames. So we were just talking about it. The rigid fiberglass is easiest to work with, or the rigid Rockwool is easiest to work with. So the more rigid, the better. Like Rob said, there are some workarounds if you want to use, the less rigid stuff. It's just harder to work with, and you have to worry about it falling down within the frame and then becoming less effective. Just full stop, because there'll be a gap, which won't be effective at all. And then as it compresses, it becomes less effective. So, yeah.
To me, because we seem to be able to get Rockwool in Canada. Our stock doesn't seem to have run out yet, although I'm not sure in Newfoundland. But he was saying he seems to have plenty of choice at his local Home Depot where he is. So about the only thing I would say is I think Rockwool is probably the easiest one to work with. It's the easiest to cut if you do need to cut it.
It's going to be a little bit more expensive than some of the other stuff.
It doesn't even tend to be irritating if you touch it without gloves or whatever like that. But what I would suggest is, if you want to make the standard 2x4 panels that most of us make, just make sure you're getting the 24-inch on center version, because most insulation is 16-inch on center, which is fine. You can make narrower panels. There's nothing wrong with that, but you might have to make more of them. So that's about the only thing I would suggest looking out for. I would probably go for one of the Rockwool products first, and if that isn't there, go for one of the rigid fiberglass. And any of them are fine. And the standard 3.5-inch thickness meant to go in 2x4s works brilliantly for most panels.
There you go. Weldon would also like printed images on his panel. So where should he go in Canada for the fabric and prints? I'm not Canadian, so Raul.
I will point you to acousticpanelscanada.com. They do printed panels. Now, on their website, it is fully completed panels, and he's talking about just wanting to get the fabric because he's making his own. But just call them, talk to them, because they do custom stuff. So I'm quite certain that if what you want is just the fabric with their printing process on it, I'm quite certain that is something they can do for you. And they don't charge ridiculous prices, so Acoustic Panels Canada.
All right, who do we have left?
Oh, can we do one more just so we're not falling way behind?
Oh, we're not going to be far. I saw how far down we were. We're not falling way
but
behind.
We've got 6 questions left if we leave it all this way. If we can just...
It's okay.
Just
we can leave it all this way.
Oh, my goodness.
It's what, almost 1 o'clock, and I'm starving. So we're done. Who's left?
We've got Derek. We've got Raul, who is in Mexico. We've got David, Charles, and Carl and Chad. Okay, that's all the names. That's a lot of names.
Right.
We'll have to try and get through them.
Right.
Their questions are short. The answers might not be. We don't know.
We won't know until next week. No, neither will you. We thank our listeners of the week. We want to thank our 132 patrons over at patreon.com. Thank you very much.
Yes, indeed. Patreon.com/AVRant podcast if you would like to sign up for an automatic monthly donation. So thanks very much to our 132 patrons over there.
Also, we want to thank Jack for sending Rob an Amazon gift card.
Yeah, Jack, thank you very much. It was very kind of you.
Thank you to Brandon, Cody, Raul, David, Weldon, Charles, Snoop, Augie, Dog 95 for the notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going during the pandemic.
Yes, indeed. I'll say the names one more time. Brandon, Cody, Raul, David, Weldon, Charles, and at Snoop, Augie, Dog 95. Thank you all very much for the notes of encouragement and the notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going. Big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
And if you want your question answered, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. For AVRant, I'm Tom Mantry.
And I'm Rob H. Now stay in and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.